agreeing to do this. I think come March 31st, I think all of us will be asked by HR if the investment, the proof of investments. Other than that, we have our own personal finances, which we are always confused about because we are flooded with, I think, too many options. And I'm sure by now we don't have to, drive home the point that investing is a good thing. But I leave PV to we couldn't find any other but PV. He's I think the most qualified person to explain to us whatever our question. We'll keep the question answers to the end. So, but in between, you will take. Okay, fine. So, as and when you have
the point is still fresh in the
mind. So, thank you, PV.
I don't know whether it merits such a grand introduction. Thank you for the same.
Phones on silent, please.
What are we looking for from today's discussion? I know some of you, we've already had an interaction earlier, about a year ago. What do we want to look at?
Best way to invest and the safest way.
No, so let us just step back a little. Does anyone dispute the need to plan finances? Is there any disagreement on that? No. So why do we want to do that?
Save the future.
For better future. Okay.
Make money work.
Not good today.
Make money work better.
So the expectation from our interaction today is to understand what we need to do for that. One of you mentioned, I want to know how to make more money. There is no mantra for making more money. There is a mantra only for the karma. The phal or the result is not in our hands. But yes, for a good result to emerge, we need to do our karma. We can't be fatalistic in our approach to say that if it is anyway pe sara sara, whatever will happen, will happen. Let me just float with the tide. That won't work. So God always says, do your karma and then I'll give you a phal. Whether it is bitter or sweet is a matter of what is here. Few kindergartenish points, but nevertheless, sometimes we tend to lose track of it in our day-to-day existence. We earn to live. Is that a fair statement? You may work for different reasons. You may work for passion, you may work for a personal pursuit, you may work for a higher level fulfillment. But all of us earn only to live. There is no other purpose of earning. We earn to live well day to day. And therefore, it's not just a matter of securing the future. We also need to live the today well. I don't want to be in rags today in the hope of riches tomorrow. I could die at 50 and that could be the end of the story. Along our journey, there are certain personal aspirations or milestones which necessitate an extra requirement of money. We need to fulfill those. We earn to provide for a tomorrow when we may not want to continue earning. So both are important. Sometimes we are forced into a situation where we can't continue to earn money. Sometimes we want to take call to say enough and more. I have work to earn, let me now work for pleasure. We also need these earnings to take care of unexpected events. Unexpected events could be good or bad. And therefore, are we all agreed that we need to earn for these? Is there anything more? I mean, this is not just a presentation that is being made, it's an interaction. So, there could be something missing here, there could be something you can add from your world experience. Please. Anything else that we may need to earn for?
Cover tomorrow.
Covers in tomorrow. But you need to know what is under tomorrow. What can be under tomorrow? If we know what is under tomorrow, we are God, which we are not. No, the importance of bracketing it under these four is that it helps us to at least plan for it. Because each of these brackets involves a different potential event, a different potential requirement. And therefore, if we plan under these, that is when we know what our starting point is. I'm earning for today and tomorrow. How much do I need for today and tomorrow is not answered by the mere theory of I'm earning for today and tomorrow. The how much part is important, and that's where these 4 blocks, and if there is a 5th block, you need to tell me. That's where these 4 blocks are important. Are we all agreed on this? So what do we need to do? We need to work to earn. We have already covered that. What else do we need to do? We will invest what?
To save.
First save.
Exactly. So we have to first save, and whatever we save, we invest. We'll come to what we save and what we invest later. Before going into that, let us look at some equations. Equation 1. Something which grows at 7% for 10 years very nearly doubles. Something which grows at 7% in 3 times the time very nearly quadruples. So the effect of a longer term on a steady rate of growth is always more beneficial. No rocket science to it, but just things which we lose sight of in our day-to-day existence, which it is always useful to refresh our understanding of that. Let us look at the second equation. 7% over 10 years very nearly doubles. But 7 increases to 12% is more than 3 times. So an increase in rate by just 5 percentage points results in something trebling instead of doubling. Yet another facet to that equation. 7% over 30 years is 7.61. 12% over 30 years is 30 times. So the trebling becomes quadrupling. Now, this is one is talking of a static number of 1. What happens to it over 7 years? What happens to it over 10 years? What happens to it over 30 years? Let's just go to the next one. This is something some of you have seen before. A static number of 1000, which is what I have mentioned there. This is what results when 1000 rupees is invested every month over the time period in the x-axis and earning the rate of return on the y-axis. So just look at 2 things here. 6% over 10 years, 1000 rupees invested every month, which is a total investment of 1,20,000. 6% doubling to 12%. You've covered 30 years. How much have you invested? 30 years, $1,000 a month. Huh?
336.
3,90,000. What has become of it? Increase in the time scale, increase in the rate scale, the effect is huge. Now, this 12% and this 30 years does not emerge by itself. You have to plan for it. Even after planning for it, it may or may not happen. So there is no guarantee that we will make it. The point is, we still need to plan for it. Plan for it, you're somewhere at the higher end of both these scales. One can see the impact that it makes. So the message, I think, for all of us is loud and clear. And especially for most of you who have this time frame. I don't have this time frame. I'm possibly somewhere here. A lot of you are looking at the ability to save over a 30-year period. Imagine if you start today, you stick to the course, what it can achieve. And the $1,000 is not going to remain $1,000. Your earning capacity is going to increase, you are going to be able to save more. And the more you save, the more careful you need to be in your planning, because idle cash is the most dangerous asset to have. Because it's not earning anything, it's only getting eaten away over time. You move to the next one. So what do we need to do? Will be decided from what we inferred from the table in the previous slide. We need to save. Someone pointed it out. Fair enough. We need to save. $1,000 invested today and left to grow over 30 years grows to a certain amount. But $1,000 invested in a disciplined manner every month over 30 years, we have seen And therefore, not just save but keep saving. You also need to invest what is saved. Otherwise, that 6%, 8%, 12% doesn't come up if we just keep the saved money either in a locker at home or in a savings account in the bank. So that's what is the message here. Why leave money idle when it can be made to work? The reason being that if money is allowed to lace, the monster of inflation will keep nibbling away at it. And that was what the 7% equation was all about. If we all, on a gut feel basis, agree that 7% is possibly the rate at which prices are growing in the economy, and you've seen that what we are spending today has to double in 10 years without any lifestyle changes at all. And what happens to it in 30 years is also for all of us to see. So if that money is lying in a savings bank account which earns 3.5%, or worse still, lying at home under grandma's bed, then it's just half over a 10-year period. The money which you have saved. Therefore, saving by itself is not enough. While investing, we should look at taking measured risks for better return. This is moving up from that 6% to that 12% or potentially even 15% of that scale. Because if we want to look at risk-free return, savings bank is theoretically risk-free, but then we are limited to 3.5%. PPF is risk-free, we are limited to 8%. Money growing at 8%, inflation growing at 7%, it leaves too little for us to fulfill all the aspirations that we talked about in those 4 blocks in the earlier slide. Why do just enough? That's the point. Why do just enough to keep inflation at bay when more can be achieved? And there are ways of achieving that more. Those ways, there is no hard and fast rule to it. What works for him may not work for me, what works for me may not work for her. That is very different. But if each of us are aware of these points, they enable us to plan better towards the future that we are looking at. So, therefore, what is key is to first assess your long-term needs and time frame. Here we are essentially talking of 3 out of the 4 blocks. The today has been removed from it because today is consumption, and then what you do with your savings is essentially for these 3 blocks. Then we have to backward to a targeted saving pattern. That table looked at 1,000 saved every month. What happens to it? Now, you backward saying, what do I need 30 years down the line? What do I need 20 years down the line? What do I need 10 years down the line? Backward to say how much I need to save every month. And therefore, the default formula of saving cannot be what I earn minus what I spend. There has to be a target. Therefore, budget your spends to achieve the target saving over time. Don't leave it to this default formula, which is a mistake most of us do. I mean, there is no. It's just that possibly in schools we need better training on these things, which doesn't happen. And therefore, when we set out to work, we are free from the inhibitions of, okay, dad didn't give me enough pocket money this month, so I didn't have enough to spend. Now that I have my own salary and I am my own master, let me spend, let me get into a revolver mode on a credit card. Things like those happen. It has happened to a lot of us, we have seen it happening. But the good part is that a number of people that I know have learned from their mistakes and very quickly corrected course. At 25, it is much easier to correct course than at 45. And therefore, please follow this formula. If any of you is not budgeting expenses, please do that. Invariably, actuals and budgets will never be the same. Otherwise, life is perfect. It is not. But when you do budget and something goes above budget, you are at least conscious about the fact that it is going above budget. So if you are splurging on a holiday and you know that you had budgeted only 20,000 for it, you have to spend 40,000. Take a conscious call to say, no, this holiday is not more important for me than the next milestone which I am saving for. So let me forego this holiday. Or you say that let me go ahead with this holiday in any case, because 6 months later I am expecting a bonus of 30,000, which I will immediately blow back here. The budgeting helps you to become conscious. The budgeting should not become a mantra to stop living today. So please remember that point. It's just like any corporate budget. Corporate situations and home situations, this is something I keep saying again and again, are the same. We just need to be able to relate it in context. Budgeting in a corporate environment and budgeting at home follow exactly the same principles. Even in a corporate environment, if something is necessary for a longer term interest, if something is necessary to be done today, which I know can be made up tomorrow, I will still take that call and go ahead and do it even though it was not budgeted. The same thing applies for us at home. So that's something for us to always bear in mind. The next part is what we talked about, moving on the return scale. It is always a function of the risk that one can take. Now, what all does risk depend on? I have listed some factors here. Do you think there are any other factors? It depends on your income level. I'm saying it depends on your age and therefore possibly your residual working life. It depends on what is in one's DNA. Some have a propensity to take high risk. Some may not have the inclination to take high risk. The point is, neither is correct. I mean, there is no, or rather there is no right or wrong to it. A low risk taker is not wrong, a high risk taker is not correct, and vice versa. But if you know what your inclination is, you will need to plan for it accordingly. Obviously, if your risk taking ability is limited, you need to set aside more to save for the tomorrow, to save for the unexpected event. If your risk taking ability is higher, it works the other way. Are there any other factors in this? Anybody who can add to this, either out of life experience or out of having seen somebody else who has used or applied some other causative factor to this? These are the points. Anything else here?
How close you are to retirement or
Which is the residual working life?
Something that you already mentioned, your aspirations. So if I have an aspiration of not working for 3 years down the line, but I know to set up my business, I would take another 3 years and I might want to save. So how much I want to save might be
That is how much you want to save, but how much risk you are willing to take. Is there any other factor that would dictate that? Because again, these are all things important for us to bear in mind. While some of this sounds theoretical, all of these have a lot of practical application if we sit down to seriously plan our life, our finances.
Also depends on the support structure. Like for a woman, I always have a support of, I'm not a breadwinner, I can take more risk even if it flops, it will not have a bad impact on me because I have someone who's there to support me.
Fair point. It is in a way getting covered here because the combined income level of the household is therefore higher to that extent than if your spouse was the only working person. So, in examples like yours, it may be a good idea to earmark finances to say that this salary will go only for this purpose, this salary will go only for a saving, into a saving channel and get invested from there. That acts as it is maybe optics, but it helps you to segregate things more easily in your mind. If in a family there is more than one person who is earning, it is easier to logically segregate it in your mind that way to say, So again, something which sounds very basic and simple, but which a lot of us don't bear in mind and don't execute accordingly. We are all in agreement till now on what has been stated. There are some options here. This is not meant to be a laundry list nor a recommended investment plan because, as I said, it varies from person to person. But at some point in the course of planning our finances, we should have looked at all of these. That is the key. We may rule out some of these because our personal risk propensity or our personal circumstances don't permit some of these things. Some of these things could be a no-no for some of us, but a must-do for some others, and that's where possibly aspiration comes in. For example, if you ask someone like me, gold or jewelry is completely ruled out because my own personal view is that it is possibly the most unproductive use of your cash. Some of the ladies here may not agree, but that's where you should then allocate it as part of your aspiration budget. Jewelry is my aspiration. My aspiration could be to possibly buy a very good 1200cc bike. Your aspiration could be to have a nice jewelry set. So you have to bucket it under the right block. That is what becomes important, because an aspirational need will always take the last priority as compared to the needs of, say, the child's education or securing the retirement fund. And therefore, when you do look at certain things where there are where a lot of personal opinion comes into view, be very clear on what the priority is. Are people mostly aware of most of these, or should we talk a little more about some of these? Savings bank, we are all aware, that's where our primary money lies. It is useful to the extent that one can keep an emergency fund with this. It is always desirable to have an emergency fund equivalent to maybe 2 to 3 months of your regular critical household expenses, so that in the event of an unforeseen adverse event where we are not able to earn, we have that much money. The same purpose is served by a recurring deposit also. The advantage of the recurring deposit being that it earns a somewhat higher rate of interest, and it can still be drawn on overnight to meet the emergency fund requirement. We are all aware of fixed deposits. I don't think we need to speak much about it, but if we are investing in fixed deposits, please make sure that you opt for a reinvestment deposit instead of a fixed deposit. You know the difference between the two? A reinvestment deposit is where you are not paid out the interest periodically, but the interest is also reinvested and it accumulates. So it gets to be a larger kitty when the deposit matures. And the other important point here being that when you get periodic interest, the sums are typically smaller and will invariably tend to waste that money. And that doesn't add to your savings. So if you're putting a 50,000 deposit, 3 years later you will get only 50,000. What happened to the 10,500 rupees interest that I earned? Oh, it came in at small lots, some 50-100 rupees every month, and I just blew it up. So make sure that one goes in for a reinvestment deposit. PPF government bonds. Are people aware of this as a mode of investment? How many of you have PPF accounts? Quite a large number, but maybe a few more can go in for it. My own personal view is that this is a very good investment avenue for 2 reasons. It is government guaranteed, gives an 8% rate of return in today's interest scenario. Theoretically, they are going to reset the interest every quarter, but they have not done it for the last 1 year because they are treating it as a small savings avenue, and therefore it is still steady at an 8% return, which is tax-free. 8% return is not exciting, but sovereign guaranteed post-tax 8% return is not bad either. And it gives you the discipline of being forced to save year after year. And in any year where you have faced an adversity, you are not able to save to the extent that you had planned, you can pay a minimum sum of 500 rupees to keep the account alive. This, in my view, is a very useful investment option for the debt part of your portfolio. We'll talk about something called asset allocation, which we'll come to later. Government bonds are bonds issued by government entities, which carry a slightly lower rate of return than bonds issued by companies. It carries 0 risk. When we talk of other debt investments, this is where I was talking of bonds issued by private companies, and then gold bonds. So if you are happy with artificial wealthy, but still want to take a bet on the price of gold moving, please invest in a gold bond. Because the advantage of the gold bond is it is paper, you get the price of gold, you pay the price of gold when you invest, you get the price of gold when you invest. There is no loss on account of making charges, remaking charges, there are no purity issues. There is very easy liquidity also. Buying gold, the metal, is the easiest thing, but selling it is one of the toughest things. You can buy gold coins or gold bars from banks, but the same banks do not repurchase that gold when you want to realize money from it. Now, we come to another category called mutual funds. How many of you are MF investors here? The number needs to be at least thrice this. So, any one of you, what is the sort of mutual fund investment that you do?
I really don't know what is that, but DSP or something.
No, I'm not asking about the fund. So, how did you get into mutual funds initially? What was the thought process, and how are you going about it in terms of recurring investments?
Basically, see, I was not interested in investing in mutual fund first of all because it carries a lot of risk. That is what my friends and the other investment and other they were been advising me. But still, I thought to take the risk and invest in mutual funds through some friend மூலமாக அதை இன்வெஸ்ட் பண்ண ஆரம்பிச்சது. But so far it has not yield anything. Only for the past 2 years I have been investing in mutual funds. But they are saying we must invest at least for 3 to 5 years to see the benefit.
You have invested in an equity mutual fund.
Equity mutual fund.
Okay. There are debt mutual funds available as an option. Are you aware of that?
No, I really don't know.
Okay. So mutual funds, what does a mutual fund do essentially? It collects money, pools and invests on your behalf. The investment management entity takes off a fee from that, and the rest of it is your money. So the return that you make is after accounting for the investment management fee of the investment manager. What is the advantage of that? Given our day-to-day schedules, are you and I in a position to understand and track investment? We are not, somebody else is doing it for us. What is important for us here to ascertain is, what is my own risk-taking ability? What is the sort of return I am looking at? And hence, I should have at least a broad understanding to say that should I go in for an equity-based investment or a debt-based investment. We'll talk about asset allocation later, but at a more generic level, a debt instrument is obviously cheaper than an equity instrument. Can any of you tell me why?
It is low risk.
Why is it lower risk?
It has guaranteed. They invest in government projects.
Maybe they will. But the government project, if some mutual fund is theoretically investing only in government debt, they will give you the same rate of interest. Why can't you do that investment directly? They are managing their portfolio. They are at least attempting to invest in something which will optimize your return. So where mutual fund scheme will have a particular objective. We will invest purely in equity. We will invest purely in debt. We might invest as a balance, and depending on what your risk-taking ability is, choose from one of these funds or a combination of these funds. But the question is one step before this: why is a debt fund generally safer than an equity fund?
There's very little chance for your money to go down.
Agreed. Why is that?
Because only way your money will go down if any of your entity, file for bankruptcy. It will happen almost never happens.
Okay, then why is an equity fund less safe?
Because that's a market linked, and if you're looking at a short period, it may go down and.
Okay, so again, I'm one step before that to say, let us forget mutual funds. Let us say that you are running your own portfolio. You are investing in the bonds of some companies, you are investing in the shares of some companies. Why is the former, by and large, a safer bet than the latter? Is the question.
You have the preference for the return, right?
Yeah,
Maybe
Exactly.
the last,
So when you invest in the debt of a company, the company is under a legal obligation to pay you a periodic interest and to repay you the principal. When you invest in the shares of the company, it is like investing in the company's ownership. You're taking a percentage ownership of the company. So ownership like share correct? And therefore there is no obligation on the company to return any money to you. Therefore, where is the incentive for people to invest? If the company has no obligation to invest, I have the cost problem. That's where the stock exchange, the stock market comes in. Shares are traded. Interested buyers will buy from interested sellers. And that's how you make your money on equity. There is no other way of making money on equity except through that and through dividends. Dividends again is one part of the profits made by the company paid to the shareholders. The company makes no profit, it is under no obligation to pay any money to the shareholder. The company has been a continuously loss-making company. The share prices might even come down to zero. but nobody is morally, legally, or in any other way obliged to the investor to return any money or make good any loss. Which is why equity is a riskier investment. That is the theoretical part of why equity is riskier. Therefore, the question might be, why is equity needed? So it is just like asking whether Russia, the communist economy, was good, or whether the capitalist economies which have managed to create employment, which have managed to generate wealth, are better. Is there anybody who would subscribe to the former theory? Does any of us think that a setup in which the state makes everything, everybody has equal income, everybody gets the same set of goods and services, is that economy better off, or is an economy which incentivizes people to take risks, do new things, produce more, increase wealth, is that better? So if we are all agreed that the latter is better, then that itself defines the need for equity investment. Because unless there is equity investment is risk capital. Unless there is risk capital being put into some business, nothing new can ever come up.
Is it like gambling? Sorry, come on.
Depends on the type of business you are engaging in. So, there really lies the answer. So, if I am, what should I say? Look at any of you look at an Apple or you look at a Google, which have all completely impacted our lives today. Google was non-existent 20 years back. Apple was a company making some personal computers 20 years ago. Today, look at how they have transformed lives. If they had not had equity capital backing in the beginning, would any bank ever have lent money to them? Say that I'll lend you this money, you pay me interest every quarter, you repay me the loan after 3 years. Would it ever have worked? It wouldn't have worked in the absence of equity capital. So there really lies the answer on why equity is required. So equity is required to create wealth in the economy, and therefore the other side to it is that equity gives us an opportunity to invest in a wealth creating initiative by taking the risk. And that's where the ability to, or rather the need to take measured risk comes in if we need to increase our return. An equity return can even be as high as 20% per annum. Debt return will never be at that level. Unless the inflation in the economy goes up. Because interest is always a function of the inflation plus a real return. So if we invest in bank deposit today and the bank deposit is giving you a 7.5% interest, maybe 6% is to compensate for inflation, 1.5% is your real return. And that will always remain at that level, it will never go up beyond that. Because the bank is in turn going to lend at 10%. It is going to make money from that and going to return you your 6% interest and do this. On the other hand, when you invest as risk capital, whatever wealth the company generates, a share of it is yours. If it destroys wealth, you're bad luck. And therefore, that is the whole framework of equity and debt at a broad level works on this. Therefore, are we clear now why debt fetches lower return with lower risk, but equity can fetch higher returns with higher risk? So, if that framework is clear, that will enable us to take a judgment call on, okay, if this is 100% equity and this end of the line is 100% debt, where should I be? And that is really what asset allocation is all about. When you are 25, would you be more on this side or this side than if you are 55? More on the risk-taking side. One important reason for the scale to slide this way is our own age and the factors that we looked at which determined our risk-taking ability. So that is really what the game is all about. It is a simple thing in theory. Practically, when we get down to doing it, get down to the nuts and bolts, there are various issues. But unless we start with this simple understanding, unless the basic premise is clear to us, we will not be able to administer our own portfolio the right way. And therefore, while these concepts are very simple, there is no rocket science to it, there is nothing complicated about it. It is something which 90% of us fail to appreciate. It is the easiest thing to understand, but it's possibly one of the toughest things to appreciate and bear in mind at all points of time. And that's why, I mean, it's sometimes more difficult to push through something which people fail to appreciate than to push through something which is to be understood with some great difficulty. And therefore, this becomes important because if I know 1,000 people, I know 900 who don't do this. Maybe even 950. There are only 50 who do it. It has to set in early enough for us to make it a discipline or a way of life. Somebody who's at 45 will find it much tougher to get into that mindset. Forget all the other things of residual working life, etc. At 45, I'll say, mindset, I will fail to appreciate all these points. And I'm 25, 30, I'll understand it or absorb it that much. Therefore, the earlier we appreciate these concepts and start off by applying some of these or most of these as relevant to our context, the better off we are. Now let's continue to look at some of these. So, mutual funds are of three types. Those which invest purely in debt, those which invest purely in equity, those which have a ratio allocation. So, depending on my ability to take risk, and I have an overall equation, I am more here at this point in life, I am here at this point in life, I am here at that point in life. Even my mutual fund portfolio can follow the same example. And mutual funds make themselves suitable for periodic investment. Can anybody tell me how? Some of you could be doing it also.
Exactly.
Who's it there? So you are doing an SIP. So everybody is aware of the concept of SIP, or are there some who are not aware of it? So why don't you share with them what an SIP is, how you sort of zeroed in on it in the first place, and how you are going about it?
SIP is basically a systematic investment plan. Every month, a certain amount that you want to go into this particular mutual fund, it will be debited from your bank account and you will get an allotment of unit. So mutual fund is more about a unit. Suppose 1,000 rupees that you spend, per unit would be 100 rupees, so you get 10 units. Like based on the up and down of the mutual fund also will have NAV. Like you have share values up and down. Similarly, you have NAVs, it may go up and down. So next month, suppose the NAV goes down, so you get more allotment of units. If NAV go up, you get less allotment of that. This is how SIP is.
So what is an SIP doing? You are getting into a plan or an agreement with the mutual fund to say, I will invest so much every week, every fortnight, every month, a particular sum of money in a particular scheme. So it gives me the discipline of A, saving, and B, periodically and regularly investing that saving. Because as we have seen, just saving is not important, it's important to invest it also. A. B, when we talk of debt, it is a case of a more or less steady return. The only risk, as someone pointed out, I think, is that if you have invested in debt in a particular company and that company fails, like the ILFS scenario which we have all been reading about in newspapers, that can happen. But that is a much smaller risk than the risk you take in the equity markets, because we see the volatility every day. So when you talk of SIP in debt, disciplined saving, disciplined investment. When you talk of SIP in equity, disciplined saving, disciplined investment, and the ability to keep investing in the ups and downs of the market, and therefore averaging your cost. It does not help to reduce the volatility. You are still subject to the volatility of the market. So let us be clear on that. And therefore, when we talked of 7% return, 12% return, etc., in the context of equity, that is not in a year-on-year CAGR. It is a CAGR over the long-term run. So you might look at an investment made in 2005. In 2009, it could have been down by 15%, but held on to it till 2018, it could have been up by 35 or 40%. So that is a typical characteristic of the equity market which we all need to understand and consciously get into that. And therefore, what does it tell you? The equity part of your portfolio is something where you should not look at timing the market from day to day. Theoretically, it is very easy to say I should buy when the market is low, I should sell when it is high. But how low is low? You buy at what you think is a low today. How do you know it won't go down any lower? Sell at what you think is a high today. How do you know it won't go any higher? Therefore, an SIP in that sense is more important in the context of equity because it makes you keep investing through the highs and lows. When do you time the market? I have a need for my child's education in 2021 and in 2019 now. From end of 2019, let me start looking at the market carefully. The minute markets go up somewhat, or if there is an event like an uncertain election because of which I anticipate the markets to go down, let me sell that equity at that point of time to the extent of my financial need and put that money into debt. So this juggling that you do between equity and debt in your portfolio is asset allocation. There are certain factors which result in a steady review and reset of the asset allocation like age, residual earning life, the ability to take risk that we talked about. This one factor is a timing specific factor. 2 ವರ್ಷ ವೇಚೆ ನನ್ನ ಕಾಸು 1.5 ವರ್ಷ ವೇಚೆ ನಾನು ಡೈಲಿ ಮಾರ್ಕೆಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೇನೆ ಕೊಂಚ ಹೈಯರ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ I will take that money out and put it into a debt fund which will give me a lower return but a steady return in those 6 months. Because if I continue keeping it in equity and I'm looking at the market the day before I want the money and if the market has crashed on that day, you're gone. So these are certain things which we need to keep in mind and therefore the thing is, it is good to earn, it is good to save, it is good to invest, but it is equally important to keep a continuous focus. That does not mean we need to stare at screens daily, no. Once a quarter review of where we are headed, not just in terms of how the portfolio is going, a lot of things could have changed. Some new fund requirement or objective might have come up. My ability to save might have gone up significantly. I was earning 50,000 a month till this year. Next year, either I got a new job or a promotion, it went up to 75,000. It is important for me to make a plan for that 25,000. I should not just forget about this because it's very easy to forget about it. I mean, if some of you have been actively investing, you could still look at examples where there are certain investments you have made and you have forgotten all about it. So either you have forgotten about the investment or you have forgotten that there is a need to review that investment. I am doing a SIP of 1,000 rupees at the age of 25 because that's what I can afford to save. But at the age of 35, notwithstanding family commitments, I could have got married, I could have had a child, but notwithstanding that, I could be having the ability to save 5,000 rupees. But I might still be stuck at 1,000. I know many such examples, but I have not bothered to review it thereafter. And that also usually happens when an investment plan is pushed on you by advisors or distributors because they have a personal benefit out of it. And one of the other negative fallouts of that is this slew of investments which happens in March in the name of tax sale. So all these are things that you are not planning. It's just happening by default because someone is pushing it on you because that someone has an interest in doing so. So we are now clear on what is the difference between a debt investment and an equity investment, and therefore when we should prefer one over the other, and what is the mix we should look for between the two if we are looking at both. Gold stroke jewelry we talked about, subjective, controversial, so depending on your personal preference, please take your choice. Real estate. Is somebody invested in real estate? Other than the house you live in, that is not real estate. That is not an investment. You will sell it, you won't. Anybody who has got into real estate as an investment? Okay, so happy? Not with the specific investment,
No.
real estate as a concept.
Yeah. Get into the.
See, real estate as an investment option is definitely an option. But you have to go into it with a clear understanding and awareness of certain things. If you look at the last 20-year time frame, there has seen substantial progress in the financial markets. Things are very transparent. In 1995, if you sold a share in the market, you would get a handwritten contract note from the broker saying 50 shares of Hindustan Lever sold at this price. this is my brokerage, and brokerage used to be 2.5% those days, and this is the net amount you get. Today, brokerage is less than 0.5%. The most expensive broker is at 0.5%. And you get a timestamp contract note certified by the stock exchange. You get the prices on the net. So you are completely aware of what the price was at the point of time that it was sold, and that is the price you are getting. So one example of how the financial markets have become completely transparent, automated and sophisticated. And for some of you who have not seen the non-IT generation, it may be laughable, but that's how markets used to work those days. The broker would give you the contract note after some 4-5 days, the payment after some 3-4 weeks. Sir, I'm ಕಾಸು ಬರಲ್ಲ எனக்கு settlement ಬಂತೊಂಡು ನಾವು ಕೊಡ್ತೋಣ. So it used to be like that. Real estate is possibly one investment avenue where the market is still like that today. There is absolutely no transparency. You have no bank, you may have a guideline value which is declared by the registrar offices, but no assurance of what is the actual value the transactions are happening at. There is still the prevalence of black money in real estate. More important thing for you from an investment perspective is you have invested in a piece of land which costs say 10 lakhs. Tomorrow you will either liquidate that land as a whole or you have to continue keeping it. You cannot unitize your investment. You invested in mutual funds, I invested in 5,000 units at 10 rupees each, 50,000 rupees, it is at 1 lakh today, I need only 20,000 bucks. I will liquidate only 20% of my holdings. I'll keep the balance 80%. Real estate does not have any such option. It is opaque. It has one risk which is common with gold. You need to keep your property safe. In fear of encroachment. Once a land is encroached upon, you file a civil case, it will transcend your lifetime. Your children will be fighting for it. So, when you invest in real estate, you can look at it as an option, no doubt, because there have been cases where people have made fabulous returns on real estate. But be aware of these risks and accordingly plan your asset allocation to real estate. That is the key part as far as real estate is concerned. Insurance. Are all of you insured for health? Other than the corporate, if the corporate insurance was not available, would you have gone in for health insurance? Let me put it that way. You wouldn't have. Wouldn't have. So, health insurance is very important because when we talk of a 6-7% inflation in the market, look at inflation and healthcare costs, it is 10% or more. Your health insurance premium doesn't go up at that rate. I mean, the premium may go up because you're enhancing your coverage. But the same coverage, the insurance premium gets reset only at specific ages, right?
Yes.
Different, so I think they have reset at 35, 45, etc. So therefore, it insures you not only against unexpected health events, but it is also insulating you from healthcare mediation. So please ensure that you and your family members are adequately covered. You all have life insurance. What is the sort of policy you have taken? Selva, you are not qualified to answer this question. All of you? Why?
I have endowment.
There is some
So why not an endowment plan?
There is some
Why take a term plan? You're just spending the premium every year. And
There is some robust.
how do you care who gets it after you die?
Whoever gets it gets a good sum.
Okay.
But people are advising to take term insurance.
And their premium is
So
very
why?
less. Premium is very less.
Premium is very less, but nothing comes back to you. You
Should not be looked
live
as
beyond
an
the qualifying
investment.
age.
Should not be looked as an investment when it comes to
Really,
term.
insurance per se, I wouldn't agree is investment by the way. It's
I think it's gambling.
Sorry.
Gambling against your life.
So why are there endowment plans?
endowment is to see immediate when there is some money back or that.
Happens 5, 10, 15 years later. Endowment plan. Yeah. Endowment plan इनके पास होगा.
इतने कासे हो.
सही बात है यार. 3 years of point यार. So why have you invested in endowment plan? And why have you gone in for term insurance?
Term is the family gets like a breadwinner.
What is insurance? Okay.
Sir, frankly speaking, It is not that insurance invest பண்றது நல்லது கெட்டது அந்த மாதிரிலாம் இல்லை.
Okay.
And the salient features, for example, Jeevananand, that was told by my advisor. So இது வந்து என்ன சொல்றான்?
Advisor or friend?
Advisor.
Okay. எங்க இருந்து புடிச்ச advisor? Someone came to you and therefore he became advisor.
Okay. So that is the case actually. இதுல வந்து that is I didn't go through கொடுத்துருக்கிற ஃபைன் பிரிண்ட்ஸ் பார்த்தோம்னா டெஃபினெட்லி அது என்ன போட்டிருக்காங்கன்னு தெரியாது.
சரி. Has anybody had an endowment policy where the term has run out? Some of the youngsters would not, but the others among us who are not so young.
Mine is not.
Okay. So did you bother to check what rate of return you got?
No, I had a dividend also. Sorry.
Did you check what rate of return you get after the policy matured? Sorry, fund yeah. The return you would have got would not have exceeded 5.5%.
Okay, definitely.
Therefore, as you said, insurance, please don't confuse it with investment. Insurance is just protection.
That was
And therefore, at 60, if I have stopped earning and I go in for a term insurance, I would be the biggest fool on earth. I'm only placing the burden of that premium on my family. I mean, it is not going to make any difference to their lifestyle whether I live or die. Forget the emotional part, I'm talking about the financial part. Emotional part, hopefully it will make some difference, but that also I'm not sure of. But financially, today I am not contributing anything to the family kitty. It won't make any difference. So, at the same time, what will happen? The insurance company has its own actuarial valuation rule. So, at 60, if I take a term insurance, the premium will be hefty. Some of the companies may not even offer an entry cover at 60, but some of them do, and the premium will be hefty. So, insurance is therefore not an option for investment, which is why there were question marks there, but an important part of your financial plan. So, it is as essential an expense for us as buying our daily provisions or our clothes or paying the electricity bill. And therefore, what coverage is required is entirely driven by one's own needs. If you go to insurance, on top of a cover which is 20 times your annual salary, but that can sometimes be over the top. You may have one more earning member in the family, and you may therefore say that if I do corporate, maybe 5 or 7 times my annual salary is enough. So one doesn't need to be necessarily guided by that mantra, because a lot of these messages are pushed with vested interest. You need to decide for yourself. Subject to sticking to certain basic principles, please decide for yourself on what the adequate cover in your context is. So that's really where we talk of insurance. Speculation. What do we mean by speculation?
Stocks.
Someone talked of gambling. Gambling is speculation. It is an investment. Speculate only with money that you can afford to lose. The challenge there is, how do you know how much you can afford to lose? And how long can you afford to lose it? So be very conscious of that. So, I mean, gambling may be a slightly less desirable form of speculation. You have these futures and options segments in the stock market. That is speculation because you are taking a bet on a short-term movement in the market. When you get into an SIP for 5 years, you are betting that if the long-term economic growth picture, the economy picture is good, 1 or 2 of my investments might go back, but overall my portfolio is likely to be aligned with the economy and is likely to fetch me a reasonable return. Speculation, there is no such thing, it is complete nonsense. I buy at 11 o'clock, I sell at 1 o'clock the same day. Stock has moved up, my good luck, stock has moved down, my good luck. So, speculate if you want to, but with this clear understanding in mind. At 25, you may think you can afford to lose some bit of it, but there again, you need to be conscious of how much and for how long. Anything else that any of you is investing in or intends to invest in?
I would doubt, like in insurance, do you have something where both life and investment can be insured together?
You have,
Both together.
but then look at it this way. You have what is called ULIPs, unit linked insurance.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that insurance is not really, the investment is not really in your control. It is linked to the term and tenure of the policy. And why mix the two things? Because then it has the charges of an endowment policy and the lack of liquidity. So you're neither with term insurance nor with an endowment plan. Yes, obviously, the insurance company would like to give you that message that it makes sense to combine the two. But the purpose of insurance is different from the purpose of investment. So long as we are clear on that, we should never mix up the two. These days, the push for ULIPs has also come down because the Insurance Regulatory Authority has brought down the commissions significantly over the last decade or so. Therefore, even the insurance companies are giving a lesser push to ULIPs because they don't see themselves making too much money there. And therefore, why were they pushing it 10 years back? Because they were making a lot of money on it. At whose expense were they making that money? Yours and mine. So that is really where it is. Therefore, as I said, it's not really an option for investment. Look at this as a separate block. Look at this as a separate block, but for the different set of reasons that I mentioned. So, is there any other category that?
Can you tell us a bit about post office schemes?
Post office schemes will be similar to this bracket. So, they fetch you a rate of return which will range anywhere from 7 to 8.5%, depending on the type of it.
But completely safe.
They are practically safe, yes, because the government will bail it out, although there is no legal obligation. Even bank deposits are only practically safe. I hope you are all aware of that.
Yeah.
There is no legal backing or sovereign backing to bank deposits. Bank deposits are insured only to the extent of 1 lakh rupees per depositor per bank. If a bank fails, you are insured to that extent, you will get back 1 lakh rupees. Put across all branches. You don't get a paisa beyond that. Principal and interest. But in the last 72 years of India's history, the government has not allowed any bank to fail. It has either been taken over by some other bank or been dissolved and the depositors' dues paid in full by the government in full. And therefore, I said practically it is risk-free, theoretically it is. If you want to look at theory, PPF is risk-free because there is a government guarantee to PPF. Because it is money which the government is borrowing from you. And the government is obliged to repay. The government will never run out of money because it has the simple job of printing more money. That may have other effects on the economy. More money, same set of goods and services being produced, what happens? Prices go up. But that's a different problem altogether. I mean, let's not mix the issues here. Point is, PPF has government guarantee. A government bond has government guarantee.
What about the new bank, like small finances banks that are coming up? Is there anything more risk? Are there any more riskier than?
See, there are two types of banks there. One category you have is what is called payment banks. Payment banks don't allow you to keep a deposit of more than 1 lakh per depositor. So don't really look at that as a serious revenue because I'm presuming that if your total portfolio grows to a size of 25-50 lakhs a dog, you wouldn't want to look at 1 lakh as a separate bracket. The MFIs, which is what you're talking about, the microfinance institutions.
Oh no, they are like small finance banks. They're actually.
Oh, you're talking of NBFCs, non-banking financial companies.
No, like for example,
Give me a name.
banks.
Sorry?
20 small finance bank.
NBFC.
NBFC.
They were in NBFC, but
Which
they
one?
now. It's like there are many, but to name a few like Fincare and 3 small finance bank.
Ah, okay. Okay.
Jana Bank.
Right.
Visa. Yeah.
See, they are. There is nothing wrong with looking at that, but divide. Don't put in your entire FD portfolio into such banks. Would be my recommendation because there is a 72-year history to no bank ever having failed. But then some of these banks take a higher risk on their portfolio side. So you don't want to be running after your money should something go wrong. It's a reasonable risk to take to have a part of your FD portfolio allocated there. So that you can optimize your return by that additional 1 percentage point or so which they offer as compared to a a bank like say an SBI. SBI has among the lowest interest rates that they offer. And if you were to make a choice between say SBI and an HDFC bank, it is offering half a percentage point more, you can put all your eggs into HDFC bank. But if you are looking at HDFC bank versus small bank, I would think put 70-75% of your money here and 25% here. Because ultimately this is money where you want to minimize the risk, which is why you are allocating it to FDs. So don't dilute that by putting too much of it into a higher risk entity.
Which one, according to you, would be better? Like investing in real estate by taking loan, or investing the money in mutual fund and then after 10 years, okay, you get the money and then invest in real estate?
I mean, difficult to give a generic answer to this question, but one thing is, the basic mantra here is don't borrow to invest. Especially in equity. And borrowing to invest in debt doesn't make sense because your borrowing cost will invariably be higher than borrowing.
What about NPS, especially after?
NPS is a good option to look at because recently they have relaxed the tax rules for that. But you have to be, is everybody aware of NPS? Okay. So what was the recent relaxation made? NPS allows you at the time of retirement to take out 60% of the accumulation as a lump sum and lock the balance 40% into an annuity. Of that 60%, only 2/3, which is 40% of the total, used to be tax-free earlier. Now the entire 60% is tax-free. But the balance 40% is an annuity, meaning that 40% will be invested to give you a monthly return. Two factors you have to be aware of. The assurance of that monthly return, A, and B, that monthly return is fully taxable. So it is a good investment option subject to your personal needs, and in seeing what my personal preferences are, these are the key factors I have to take into account. That 60% which comes in is tax free. The balance 40%, A, comes over a period of time. B, no assured rate of interest, and C, it is fully taxable.
But isn't it actually better to actually have an NPS plan rather than not have take care
No. There is, as I said, there is nothing right or wrong to it. It will all depend on your personal preference. If you ask me, I would rather like to be in control of my investments, and therefore I would want something which gives me a 100% out option when I retire. But somebody else may be comfortable with it to say, okay, I am comfortable with getting 60% lump sum which I will invest in other revenues. I am happy to have this 40% invested in whatever annuity return it gets, on which I am happy to pay tax. So it will depend on personal outlook, and therefore, as I said earlier, we need to have these factors clear in our mind. Once we have clearly understood that, then we will be able to relate it to our situation and take a decision. But yes, before this tax relaxation, NPS was far more unattractive because on that lump sum, additional 20 percentage points you were paying full tax, and in the year of your superannuation, you are likely to be at the maximum marginal rate of tax. 2 years later, it could be in the 20% bracket or maybe even in the 10% bracket. But that particular year, you will be in the 30% bracket. There lies the problem.
NPS also has the additional 50,000 exception in the.
True. So that's one of the things I'm coming to, which also we need to keep in mind. So we go to the next one. Sorry, before that, anything else to be added here?
Lighter
Silver,
investment
diamond.
in children. Lighter note.
So what is the investment you make in your children? Let me understand.
Any investment done today, you might not have the return tomorrow. At least they will not trouble you for.
So that is.
That is more speculative.
So that comes under the needs planning. Not to achieve
Need
that
for
need.
them, sir. Investment for me because tomorrow they
So
may
what are you doing? You are making an investment to fulfill that need.
fulfill their need
So
and
it is not an investment option. It is something for you to zero in on an investment option. What else? Silver, diamond. Yeah, gold, silver, diamond, everything madla, commodities. Those are again speculative options because they involve taking short-term calls. I'm investing today, 1 month later the price of tur dal will be so much. I don't know how to do that with my money. I mean, it is quite possible that my weighted average return can go up from 12% to 15% as a result of that. But it's also possible for it to go down to 8%.
Future
I'm
stocks.
happier living with 12%. Futures and options also same mistake. Again, it's a matter of personal preference, but I would think that most of us would tend to be happier without those extra 2 percentage points than with a very high risk of losing 4 percentage points out of our existing return. So that's, as I said, again a personal call to be taken, but may not be a very sensible call on a sustained basis. You are a commodities trader, it is very different. That's your business. But you're saving for a future need, beyond a point it won't make sense. Therefore, it will be subject to the mantra that we gave here, the speculative mantra. I think these messages we have discussed during the course of our interaction. Steady saving, no disputes. We need to. Whether we do it or not is different. We need to. We need to. Any lump sum benefit should be saved at least in part. I get a 2 lakh bonus this year. I should try and save as much of it as possible. I should not deny myself the holiday which I was planning from it. But blowing up the entire 2 lakhs on the holiday may not be twice as good. So that again is a personal call, but lump sum benefits being saved at least in part create those additional pockets of wealth which will allow us to fund an aspiration which we may not have foreseen today. The first 3 blocks that we built initially, we will not be able to foresee everything about that. Something else comes up, I am in a happier position to fund that if I do this. It also provides a cushion to save me from some downside to the portfolio. Tax saving is not to be the primary objective. So the NPS point is important, but if you have other avenues which yield a better pre-tax, don't do it just for the tax saving. Treat it as an incidental benefit. Obviously, it is a benefit because it gives you immediate additional cash flow. But let that not be the primary guide to investments, which is what happens when an advisor pushes himself on us. Because on the 29th of March, he is telling us the CLSS scheme is open, please invest, you will be able to bridge your ATC gap. I do that, I forget all about that. Worse will be if and people have done this, taken endowment policies every year in March. So people have held 5 policies with some assured of 30,000 each. I'm paying premium on all 5. It is just a meaningless meandering portfolio. The agent is happy because you invested in March, helped him fulfill his target and get his commission. So it didn't make sense for anything else beyond that. This is the important part. You were talking about the equity debt continuum. Decide on an asset allocation, stick to it. Therefore, don't look at the market daily. When you invest in equity and you start looking at markets daily, that is the end of it. Unless you are speculating. For your speculative portfolio, you may even want to look at it every hour. But if you are a long-term investor, please don't look at it daily. You are saving and investing steadily in the long run. You analyze equity returns over any 5 or 10 year period starting from 1991 when reforms in India started. You will get the answer. And therefore, as I said, the other point is to be kept in mind there. When we talk of a 12% CAGR or a 15% CAGR, it is not a 12 or 15% return year on year. It has seen volatility, but over the long run, it is fetching you that return. So long as you recognize that about equity, you will feel comfortable investing in it. It will become a habit. It will become an order of life for you. The thing which goes with this is stick to a long-term goal. Unless there are compelling circumstances like an emergency in the family, whether it is medical emergency or something else, don't waver from your allocation. Oh my God, I have been investing for 20 years now and I put aside so much money. If something like this happens or if something like that happens, what should I do? That is not the right way to go about it. I have targeted this, let me continue doing it. If an actual event happens, I may have to unexpectedly draw down on the corpus, I will do that. But till then, let me not waver from the course. I had said once a quarter earlier, but at least do it once a year. Whether it is how much expense I budgeted, how much I ended up spending, or I targeted saving so much, I have saved so much, or I expected my returns to be so much, but my returns till date are so much. Are they likely to go up? Are they likely to go down? If I have no hopes of it going up, should I review my asset allocation? Things like those, please at least do once a year. Instead of meeting that agent in the last week of March, spend one day doing this. Obviously, there are no guarantees in life, so is the case with finances. We have to be prepared to face hardship and rebuild. It holds true for anything in life. I could lose my job tomorrow. The sole breadwinner in the family may die and I have to start building from scratch. Same thing applies to our investment portfolio. Any other mantra anyone has?
Try more avenues of money making. Try more avenues.
I thought that was the basic topic. This is mantras for money making. Yes. So more avenues will depend on what your own outlook and risk taking ability is. So you will diversify yourself across the possible options. Anything else?
Be happy with what you have.
That is a mantra for life. So you need to come here, sit with your legs crossed. Any other mantra?
Mayank.
Next one. I already gave this mantra. Not get so bogged down by all this that you stop living today. Because if I have not lived today, 60 years down the line, or 20 years down the line, if I am sitting with an arthritic knee, I will only keep regretting that. So, just like anything has a balance between equity and debt, a balance between saving and spending for today is equally important. Anything in life needs a balance, also this. Ultimately, the objective of life is not to torture yourself today for a good tomorrow. It is to live a balanced today for a secure tomorrow. Anything else which any of you would like to
So I
point
just have an
out?
observation to make, which you made. See, we've been talking like people in government who work for government organizations, we consider them lucky in the sense because they get a huge pension or they get.
Not those who started service after 2004, but yes,
Okay,
those
so
prior to that.
now
So,
is the reason for that because they were paid much less, and which is why they get a pension. But nowadays,
I don't think the government has applied so much thought to that. It's just sort of materialized that way. Yes, if you are a government employee, an ex-government employee who is getting a pension today, you might have a sense of entitlement to it by justifying it that way because government salaries were not market linked, so there was complete security and a lot of other perks which never got, a monetary value never got ascribed to that. Like my dad was in the government, he used to stay in a huge 3-bedroom house. That was never considered as part of his salary. While if he had been working in the private sector, the value of that house would have been included in the CTC. But having said that, as I said, the government did not give so much thought to it while structuring it that way. In fact, it really happened the other way. They came up with the concept of pension in the days of Jawaharlal Nehru. And beyond a point, the pension liability, that monster became too huge to handle for them. Because it's not just that they were paying you a pension, they were also linking it to inflation, revising it year after year by increasing the dearness allowance. And with every successive pay commission coming in, the basic pension itself kept getting reset. So much so that all the pensioners today, even after you account for the discounting for inflation, earn a far higher amount as pension than they were earning as their last salary. So that has become a monster for the government, which is why all those who joined government service after 1st January 2004 or 2005 are no more entitled to a pension. They are on NPS, where they contribute to the NPS and the government gives a fixed share, just like we have PM to the NPS.
this is central government employees also.
Central government employees also.
Any thought about like in the long term, does it even make sense to go with active mutual fund?
Go with.
Active mutual fund rather than.
You asked a very good question. Why didn't you point it out when you were looking at options? So, what is an active mutual fund versus a passive mutual fund. Maybe you can educate the others. Is anybody aware of this? No. You are aware. Okay. So why don't one of you tell the rest what is an active mutual fund? versus what is passive?
When we say that mutual fund, essentially, as name says that they collect money from multiple people and that money gets invested. But usually there's one designated or few designated people who decide where to invest that money. So when people actively decide where to invest your money, that becomes like an active mutual fund based on their, and you don't really have any say apart from the guideline that mutual fund have. But there are other way to invest the same money, which is like a passive mutual fund, which essentially means that they will have a benchmark like Sensex or Nifty, and in that benchmark they will, based on the asset allocation of share in that benchmark, they will. So essentially, like instead of a person, people will do the computer will do the investment for them. So because there's a person involved, there's a high risk, high reward scenario. And on the commission point of view, there's that commission in the passive mutual fund is usually way less than active mutual fund.
Everyone understood clearly? So what does a passive mutual fund do?
Sorry?
What does a passive mutual fund therefore invest in?
They invest in the almost same, they target a benchmark like Nifty.
Exactly. So you have what are called index funds. So whether you take BSE Sensex or BSE 500 or Nifty 50, what are these all? These are stock indices. How does a stock index get created? They identify a basket of stocks, and based on their price movements, the index is benchmarked. So that basket of stocks is usually identified based on robust companies with a high market capitalization, industry leaders, and so on. So the stock exchanges have a set of criteria for that, and they earmark those stocks accordingly. So what does an index fund do? The index fund's portfolio is made up of the same set of stocks in the same ratio as the weightage of these stocks in the index. We are all clear at a broad level on what an index fund is. And therefore,
Very sorry. First of all, I have this doubt. It is a very silly, maybe very silly.
not
basic
at all.
question.
Nothing
Why
is
do we have 3 indices?
That is because these are two different stock exchanges.
In a country, can we have 2 different stock exchanges or 2 different, like Nifty, they call it as BSE.
Why do you want one stock exchange and no competition?
I really don't have idea.
Because the stock exchange also ultimately makes money from transaction charges, etc., which are charged for each trade. In any business, you want competition to ensure that one player does not. So it is BSE and NSE are actually competitors. The NSE is by far the more leading market. BSE is the oldest player, having started in the 1800s. Now, each index serves a different purpose. You could have sectoral indices. You have BSE Healthcare Index. You have an NSE IT Index. The BSE Sensex is made up of only 30 stocks. In a country where 7,000 companies are listed, 30 stocks may not be representative of the broader market. So you have a BSE 500. So each of these indices serve a different purpose. The stocks within them obviously work differently depending on how each individual stock works. Not only that, the composition of the index is revised from time to time because the relative position of companies can keep changing. You look at the leading companies in the stock market 20 years ago. Some of them are marginal players today, some of them are not even in existence. One of the biggest examples is, other than the Aditya Birla Group, all the Birla companies. They were very big in the mid-90s. Today, most of them are nowhere. So therefore, the composition of the index also keeps changing. But the passive fund blindly invests in this composition. And therefore, your returns move the same way as the index moves. And because it is passive investment, no active investment effort is being made. As you pointed out, the investment management fee which the fund charges is also much lower than for a conventional mutual fund. Now, where would you want to take such a call? You may want to take such a call saying that I am happy to look at the risk of investing in equity, but I would like to not get into a fund management situation where the fund manager can go all over the place. I am happy with the way the Sensex has performed. Let me invest in the Sensex linked index fund. Where can it go wrong? Where the broader market does much better than the Sensex. But that would only mean that you have not earned that extra return. You are happy taking a somewhat lower risk. You are happy to have got that lower return, but possibly a more certain return. At the same time, what have you done against the fund management charge of 1.5%? Possibly the fund management charge here is 50 basis points. It can vary from fund to fund. So you've saved 1 percentage point of your return on that. So again, a matter of personal preference, but it's a very good point he brought out, which I had missed. So even within equity, you have the option of looking at index funds for a part of your portfolio. You may lose out a bit on the upside, but it will by and large possibly be less volatile than the market as a whole.
So is index funds are called active mutual funds, or they are different?
No, I mean passive mutual funds is just a term we use to describe them. Each of the fund houses has an index fund also.
Okay.
So when you choose a scheme, you choose an index fund. It's one of the schemes. Just like they have a gold scheme where the return is linked to the price of gold, or they have a large cap, a sectoral fund, a healthcare fund, or a general large cap fund. Same way they have an index fund also.
So that
Have you invested in index funds?
Yeah, like I invested in one called Nifty Net 50.
Okay. Yeah, there are a number of options there. So
Just to elaborate on that, it seems that index fund does so well that no mutual fund actually have that as benchmark.
in the last 2 years, that has actually been true. A lot of the index funds have beaten the general performance of fund managers. So, but one needs to see it over a slightly longer period to establish that as a trend. So far, we don't have enough history to be able to establish that as a trend. But in the last 2 years, what you're saying is correct. That has actually been. The fund
That's why,
managers
like, my question was like going forward, like where market.
See, difficult to say. It can go both ways. So do an allocation. Again, why do we do an allocation across asset classes? Because A, we are trying to improve our return by taking different types of risk. We are also trying to balance. You may say that 5% of my portfolio I want in gold bonds. Because if tomorrow the economy is in a bad shape for a 2-3 year time frame, gold as a safe haven is going to do well. So the gold bonds will do well to either mitigate the pain on the other part of the portfolio, or that can be used as an avenue from which you draw down for an immediate need, while the others can be preserved for a longer term growth because today they are not doing so well.
So regarding gold bonds, is there any lifetime, like you will have to liquidate and then buy it again? Or?
No, see, gold, there are two things here. Gold bonds, which are issued by the government, which carry an interest rate, I think the current rate is 2.75%, and they have a 7-year time frame. At the end of 7 years, whatever is the price of gold, you will get that depending on the number of units you subscribe. The other is gold funds, gold mutual funds, which are open-ended funds. You can buy and sell at any point of time depending on the prevailing price. So, depending on whether you have an immediate need for funds, you will choose one over the other. If you are happy to wait out 7 years, maybe you can go in for the gold bond. The disadvantage there is that on the day the bond is redeemed, if the price of gold is low, then you are stuck. While that doesn't happen in a gold mutual fund because it's an open-ended fund. Next time.
Where does one go to find agents for mutual funds? Somebody who doesn't, somebody who you can trust.
One can do it by oneself, but otherwise there are advisors. In fact, I think last time I thought we can have them come here and take another session if a reasonable number of people, at least 8-10 people, are interested in looking at this.
Because Axis Bank, somebody made me invest some money. And then
Please,
when I tried to contact them, he was
please
not
avoid bank advisors for two reasons. A, they are always pushing their targets. And B, you invest in 2018, the person in 2019 has gone elsewhere.
That's what happened to me. He was missing after that.
So don't let it happen again.
So which is why I'm asking. So if
So we can make this introduction.
no, otherwise for a lay person, like you read these Geogent and all those companies, when they
No,
talk
see,
about so
for you to directly decide on which fund to invest in, need a little bit of time to track, and the advisor does do some amount of value add. So it may be worth that price. Maybe use an advisor for 3 to 5 years, and after that one is comfortable, one does it on one's own. Or if somebody has the time to track and take calls today, DIY is the simplest thing today because of the and it is also hassle-free today. You don't even have to put pen to paper, you can manage an entire portfolio. So for all those interested in investing in mutual funds, please do your electronic KYC, what is called the CKYC first. And then you are good to go with any fund in India. That is point. Beyond that, God is great, all the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Vicky. And I think let us know if you some of you are interested, and we can definitely get
Sure.
I thought too. Yeah. So let us know.
Because they can come in more specifically, talk in greater detail about investment analysis. We have looked at certain general principles here, but they can understand the specific requirements of each individual and tailor a portfolio for them. My recommendation would be that if you do get into the mutual fund group, look at an SIP, don't look at lump sum investments, at least at this stage. 5-10 years down the line, when you've God willing built a substantial portfolio and you're in a position to take some additional lump sum calls, get into lump sum investments.
Thank you, PV.
Thank you.